My phone was in there, plugged into this, like that. And then I was setting up some water to boil, and my phone fell from this and landed in this cup with eggs in it. And I was going to use the cup to hold the shells after I cracked them. But isn't that beautiful? It just pretty much stayed all in the cup. So now I just have to dump these sprouts in with the eggs. Which, I would prefer to just eat them raw, but, why cook anything, really? Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. So yeah, back to...
Comes also an appropriate measure of resolution. The past proves the future, which is but the extension of good works toward their fullness. The mystery schools neither restrained nor limited the unfoldment of human institutions. Man fashioned his civilization according to his natural insubstantiation.
Yeah, there's
that which he fashioned.
egg on this lens portion.
The esoteric tradition souls the ordinary works contribute to the essential growth of human character. An administrative system which ignores ethics, culture, and morality cannot survive as a dominant political organism. Feared are respected according to the measure of integrity revealed in their management. The future of human society is intimately associated with the destinies of these vast enterprises which have inherited, along with physical success, the duties, the record, a privilege of world guardianship. Even the continuance of the economic theory now demands the strengthening of ethical convictions. Providence of any kind, whether bestowed by wealth or authority, carries with it priestly obligations. The leader, whatever be his field, is looked upon for intelligent guidance. His convictions inspire his followers, his words influence their lives, and his policies dominate their activities. There is every indication that the esoteric tradition will next function through that complex of vast interrelated organisms of production and distribution which now dominates human imagination. While this structure may appear to the superficial minded as heartless and soulless, it is also the largest and most powerful potential instrument for the advancement of mankind ever yet devised. Education, science, and economics are today indivisible. They have already formed a partnership for their mutual advancement. Equipped with knowledge, and the necessary physical resources, this huge combine awaits the destiny for which it was intended. There is no virtue in burdening the future with the conclusions of today. To prophesy is to restrict not the will of heaven, but the mind of man. Old principles, as they reveal more of themselves, will be given new names, and progress is always an adjustment of concepts, each of which is in a constant state of change. Imponderable ordinance conveys a conviction of natural unfoldment. It is reasonable to infer that the democratic motion will continue until all of its earth. But in the larger dimensions of time, all things work together for the fulfillment of the greater good. No, ladies and gentlemen, it is not, for this was written by Manly P. Hall in Los Angeles, California, in April of 1951. Humanism, the concept that man will become God, and the new religion will change with the needs of man, not man conforming to the laws of God. Secret societies of mystery Babylon. He was a priest of the order. Forward from that point to the present, so that you will finally have an understanding of America's assignment with destiny. Yucatecan hero and Kukulkan, whose worship extended throughout the Central American area. Mysteries. From the legendary histories of these persons, they should be included as a depth-stimmently founded palanquin and built a temple with many subterranean chambers, which was called the House of Darkness. Here he deposited the records of his nation in the keeping of certain aged men called guardians. There is a legend, folks, that this Wotan was the grandson of Noah. The original book containing this report was in the possession of Nunex de la Vega, Bishop of Chiapas, but he destroyed it with the other native manuscripts which he was able to accumulate. Fortunately, however, it had been copied by Aguilar. Itzamna, according to Aguilodo, was a priest who came with the migrations from the east. He was the son of the supreme deity, Hunaku, or the Holy One. Itzamna is pictured as an ancient of him have been found indicating his birth from a plant growing from the earth. He is also shown rising from the mouth of a serpent or a turtle to symbolize that he came from the sea. He healed the sick and restored the dead to life. He lived, according to the records, to a great age and was said to have been buried at Izamal, where his tombs became places of pilgrimages. It's now known as sometimes called the skillful hand, and after his death his body was divided. His skillful hand was placed in one temple, his heart in another, and the rest of his remains in a third. One of the best known of his emblems was a tau, or T-cross. It is now generally admitted that the Quetzalcoatl of the Nahuatl people, the Gukumats of the Quiches, and the Kukulkan of the more southern Mayas were one person. In each language, the word signifies feathered, plumed, or winged serpent. This title may have resulted from Quetzalcoatl casting his lot among or gathering his first followers from heraldic events. At a remote time, this semi-Quetzalcoatl came from the fabled land of the seven colors. Quetzalcoatl was the initiate philosopher and teacher of the Nahuatl tribes of central Mexico. Torquemada, in his Indian monarchies, described a band of people who came from the north dressed in long
This is so weird.
Arriving at Tula, these strangers were well received, but finding the region already thickly populated, they continued. These wanderers were great artists and skilled in working metals. Quetzalcoatl was the
Quetzalcoatl.
Indiana, in his ecclesiastical history, described Quetzalcoatl as a white man with a strong formation of body, broad forehead, large eyes, and a flowing beard. He wore a mitre on his head, and was dressed in a long white robe reaching to his feet and covered with a design of red crosses. In his hand he held a sickle. His habits were ascetic. He never married and was most chaste and pure in his life, and it is said to have endured penance in a neighboring mountain, not for its effect upon himself, mind you, but as an example to others. He condemned sacrifices, except of fruit or flowers, and was known as the god of peace. For when he addressed on the subject of war, he is reported to have stopped his ears with his face.
It's like grass,
Bernardino,
sticks, and leaves.
described Quetzalcoatl as very homely, with a long head and a very long beard, covered with blankets. His vassals, writes the good Fray, were all workmen in the mechanic arts and skillful in cutting the green stones called chalchivites, also in the art of smelting silver. Quetzalcoatl also owned all the wealth of the world.
Oh, that's so good.
Silver and green stones called chalchivites, and other precious things, and had a great abundance of cocoa trees of different colors, which are called Xochicacatl. The said vassals of Quetzalcoatl were also very wealthy, and did not lack anything at all. They never suffered famine or lack of corn. In fact, they never ate even the small ears of corn, but rather heated their baths with them, using them instead of firewood. They also say that the said Quetzalcoatl did penance by pricking his limbs and drawing blood, which he stained the maguey points that he bathed at midnight in a spring called Zicapea. The interpreter of the code with his promise that one day in the future he would return and restore his kingdom among them. It's time for our break, folks. Don't go away. I'll be right back after this very short pause. Hello, folks. This is William Cooper for Swiss America Trading. Now, for those of you, where will you stand? Will you be left holding the bag, worthless money, or will you have protected yourself?
Son's beginning. He left behind him a priesthood that perpetuated with esoteric rites the mysteries of the feathered serpent. Indians were uncertain of their tribal history. There is reason to believe, however, this was supposed to contain the account of the migration of the Aztecs from Asia, from time immemorial, even setting aside who were colonists from Central America, as we learn from an unpublished manuscript written by a Jesuit father, the Reverend Anelo Oliva, at the beginning of the year 1631 in Lima, and now in the library of the British Museum in London. Of his people thus, that they recognized and believed in God who dwells in heaven, and that this God was Father and Son and Holy Spirit, and that the Father was called Icona, who had created men and all things. Quetzalcoatl is still represented as a snake with many heads. There is an account that this snake was killed and eaten at times of great national peril, especially at eclipses, which were regarded as portents of disaster. It was believed by the Mayas that Kukulkan descended invisibly from the sky and personally received the offerings during certain great feasts. Berg was not entirely convinced that ventriloquism, animal magnetism, or the tricks familiarly employed by conjurers explain the mysteries of Nagualism, as the black art of these Indians is called. Benton quotes from the Popol Vuh, truly, this Kumas Quetzalcoatl became a wonderful king. Every 7 days he ascended to the sky, and every 7 days he followed the path to the abode of the dead. Every 7 days he put on the nature of a serpent, and he became truly a serpent. Every 7 days he put on the nature of an eagle, and again of a tiger, and he became truly an eagle and a tiger. Remained until the year 1880.
Thank you, Tom. Ladies and gentlemen, that was his first time ever speaking over radio around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he's called on talk shows before, but this is different when you're sitting at the microphone. It's your thing. When you know that one slip could cause a flood of letters and protests vying for his attention, and it took a great effort, along with his natural nervousness, doing this for the first time. It was a great effort. I'd like to write Tom and tell him who you are. Say hello. I'm headed by Manny P. Holiday. May not have died in the last several years, and bit by bit, an unbelievably huge library that he had accumulated over his years that made up the bulk of the Philosophical Research Society has disappeared. Good night.
Okay, child, can't be no homosexual like the NASDAQ. Move white girls like I coke up my ass crack.
Sure that nobody misses any portion of any of this series. And we continue now. It was written that the Cholulans deeply admired Quetzalcoatl, the great priest, because of the purity of his life, the kindliness of his manner, and his doctrines of peace and brotherhood. He remained with them for nearly 20 years. Later, even the converted Indians were uncertain of their tribal history. There's reason to believe, however, that some sacred records were intentionally suppressed and were never available to the missionaries. The people of Mexico claim to have sacred accounts of the mysteries. Few Americanists to be accepted into the confidence of the ever-reticent Indians of the Western continent. Apac, the founder of the Inca dynasty, who were colonists from Central America, as we learned from an unpublished manuscript written by a Jesuit father, Reverend Antonio Oliva, at the beginning of the year 1631 in Lima. Now it resides in the library of the British Museum in London. A number of authors have tried to prove that Quetzalcoatl was called Bacav, and that he was born of a virgin called Tiberius, who is in heaven with God. Among the Lacandones, Quetzalcoatl is still represented as a snake with many heads. There is an account that this snake was killed and eaten at times of great national peril, especially at eclipses, which were regarded as portents of disaster. It was believed in his essays of an Americanist devoted...
It's not that I blame or hold it against other people who have lost touch with me. The ones who... But it's my fault for being worth losing, you know? I was the one worth leaving.
Santo, Shi Santo, Shi Santa, Shi Santo, Shi Santa, Santo, Santa, Shi Santo, Mica, Shi Santa, Mi, Gua Shi Santo, Mica, Shi Santa, Mi. Chonga bi shi nya do, chonga nya do, chonga bi shi nya do, chonga si nya do. Chong se ka ne nya do, chong se di do nya do. A ke so se, esta no me sea. A ke so bi, chong ga san da. A ke so se. So se. Chong ga to san, chong ga to ne. 총 같은 내 총도 신나요 총도 신치성 안개 속세 총과 와세 총과 왕차.
I didn't know that was on a loop. Oh. As stated earlier, there can be little doubt that the Greeks were aware of the existence of the American continent long before the beginning of the Christian era. If information is not general on that point, it is equally surprising how little is known about the man Christopher Columbus, who is accredited with the discovery of the New World. The date of his birth is unrecorded, and 20 cities claim Columbus as a native. So many legends have sprung up about this strange man that it is difficult to distinguish fact from fancy. In 1937, a little book was published entitled Christopher Columbus Was a Greek. According to its author, Spiros Katteras, the real name of Columbus was Prince Nikolaos Ypsilantis, and he came from the Greek island of Chios. The statement is backed by quotations from numerous early historians and state documents. The author of this little book has documented his opinions in a manner to bring joy to the critical reader. He mentions the following Greeks who navigated the Atlantic Ocean in ancient times: Hercules, Odysseus, Coleus, Pythias, and Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes. I apologize. He points out that the language of the ancient Mayas of the American continent contains many words of pure Greek belonging to the Homeric period, and, to quote the book, years ago, in the Republic of Uruguay, South America, were discovered traces of the army of Alexander the Great, swords and thoras with the inscription Ptolemeos Alexandroi. All modern research on the life of Columbus tends to prove that he was not a man of humble station, poor or uneducated, and the story of Queen Isabella and her jewels is rapidly becoming recognizable as fiction. Columbus is emerging as a man of impressive personality, with marked abilities as a leader and organizer, and an excellent classical education. Like most Greeks of his time, he admired the writings of Plato and the other classical philosophers. He had the Greek birthright of legend and tradition, and was mentally well suited for interpretation of classical lore. There is much to indicate that Columbus was inspired for his voyages by Plato's account of the lost Atlantis and the records of early navigation to the west. Furthermore, Europe was not without some knowledge of geography, and in his day there were many scholars aware of the spherical form of the earth. A great trade with Asia had long passed over the caravan routes of the Near East, as the Arabs, for the most part, were a friendly people. But with the rise of the Turkish Empire to power most of these routes were closed to the infidel. When even the Crusades failed to keep clear the roads of commerce, it became ever more desirable to discover a western passage to the Orient. It was for this purpose that Columbus sailed, and not from an Italian or Spanish port, but from the Greek port of Mahon. I don't know how you say that, I apologize. It is astonishing how difficult it is to ascertain the facts about the celebrated voyage of discovery and the life of one. It is astonishing how difficult it is to ascertain the facts about the celebrated voyage of discovery and the life of one so prominent in history as Christopher Columbus. It appears that history entered into a conspiracy to conceal the truth. Possibly an elaborate misrepresentation was intentional, for certainly the confusion began before the death of Columbus. His own son refers to his father as a Greek. It has been suggested that Columbus changed his name because of religious or political pressure, but this is in the field of conjecture. Then, too, in browsing about among old records, I have run across a dim figure involved in the life of Columbus, a strange man who seems to have served the explorer in the capacity of counselor. Nothing very tangible has as yet come to light, but it is hinted that this mysterious person accompanied Columbus on his first voyage. He was not included in the list of the mariners. He did not return, but remained in the West Indies. Beyond this, no further mention is made of him. This mysterious stranger is reminiscent of the black-robed man who guided the destiny of Mohammed. Were these obscure figures ambassadors of the secret government? Columbus being one of the agents through which the Society of Unknown Philosophers accomplished its purposes? It is my opinion that he was such an agent. The signature of Columbus, composed of letters curiously arranged and combined with Kabbalistic designs, certainly conveys far more than is inherent in the signature of a private citizen. The importance of Columbus in the larger scheme of things is to be estimated from his relationship to the pattern of his own time. Europe, passing from the obscuration of the medieval period, was coming into the light of the modern way of life. The motion of the Renaissance had spread like ever-widening ripples over the surface of a stagnant pool. Printing had been discovered. The mental emancipation of man from the tyranny of ignorance, superstition, and fear was gradually being accomplished. The democratic ideal was beginning to assert itself over the tyranny of decadent aristocracy. As the mental horizon broadened, the physical horizon extended also. The Crusades had broken up the structure of feudalism, principalities were forming themselves into nations, and the tribal consciousness was disappearing from the theater of European politics. This progress was opposed at each step by vested interests, but the human mind was becoming aware of its own powers, in a motion of continuing irresistible force. A new world was necessary for a new idea. When it was necessary, it was discovered. That which is needed is always near if man has the wit to find it. Today, we are again seeking for a new world. No longer do there remain undiscovered continents to serve us as laboratories for social experiments, so we are turning our attention to other kinds of worlds, worlds of thought, inner spheres which must yet be explored by daring navigators. Science, in the last 50 years, has discovered a new universe, the universe of the mind. The infant psychology has but to come of age for us to fully discover a new sphere for new exploration in the science of living. The voyages of Columbus were followed by 2 centuries of enlarging our geographic knowledge of the earth. Explorers who sailed the 7 seas seeking wealth brought home knowledge. It released human thought from its Mediterranean fixation and accomplished the still greater end of breaking the power of a Mediterranean theology and a Mediterranean way of life. Men began to think world thoughts, began to realize that while the whole earth was one land divided into continents and oceans, it still was a gigantic unity. Out of the global wanderings of stout tea... Oh, child, the concept of a global world, at least in terms of geography, is now our common inheritance. After 450 years, we accept it without question, but mainly to toy with the belief that we will accomplish something in terms of ultimates if we can industrialize the entire planet. Our world is still too large for us to know how to use it. We have discovered much, but the greatest voyage still lies before us. Our venture will be into that greater ocean that lies beyond the boundaries of the known. The new voyages will be made in laboratories, and the contrary currents will be the cosmic rays that move through the seas of universal ether. This will require of each man that he make a long journey of discovery within himself, searching out the hidden places of his mind and heart. As Socrates so wisely observed, all mankind lives along the shore of an unknown land. This unexplored world abounds in wonders and is filled with riches beyond the wildest dreams of old Spanish conquistadors. In this land beyond the sea of doubt, the wise men dwell together in shaded groves, And here, according to the old tradition, the scholar, the musician, the artist, and the poet, who makes the discoveries that science and philosophy must later prove, have already found the better way of life. I mean, I kind of want to... Oh, no, I can't make more tea. I threw my eggshells in the... That's so stupid. Got a little candle, though. That's cool. Warplanes are soaring overhead. I mean, I'll be fine in this here car for... I'm good for a few months, you know. I'll get trapped in this exact little car. Christopher Columbus sailed his little ships for a land which by the writings of ancient philosophers he knew existed, and each of us, in the fullness of time, will make our own voyage in search of a philosophically charted, better world, to follow the advice of Homer, to prepare our ships, unfurl our sails, and facing the unknown, go forth upon the sea, to find our own far distant native land. 11 years after Columbus reached our shores, an extraordinary man was born in France. In adult life, he was both a respected physician and a mystic who was able to write accurately the history of the world to come. There was no indication at the time that in the Western Hemisphere would arise a great nation, but Dr. Michel Nostradamus saw a civilization established there that would observe, always on a Thursday, a day to express thanksgiving for freedom of religion, freedom of opportunity, and freedom of life. He prophesied that this nation would free itself from the bonds of the mother country, would greatly prosper, but would have to fight several wars. One with the Orient, before becoming a great power in a pattern of world peace, with other nations looking to it for leadership. All that he foretold is precisely according to the Platonic tradition. Nostradamus Nostradamus was a respected physician, a man of outstanding medical accomplishments. Few details of his life are available, but from the context of his manuscripts, his epistles to the King of France, and his letters to his own son, it is evident that he too belonged to the Order of the Quest. Mystic, philosopher, astrologer, alchemist, and Kabbalist, Nostradamus was versed in all the secret lore, disclosed only to those who have bound themselves with the oath of the Brotherhood. The prophecies of Nostradamus might have come entirely as revelations of the Spirit, but it is equally possible that in his quaint old doggerel verses he included part of the plan of things to come, as already well set in the minds and purposes of his brother initiates. The first edition of the Prophecies of Nostradamus was published in 1660. At that time, the Americas were still the happy hunting ground of Spanish adventurers. There was no indication that in the Western Hemisphere would arise a great nation. Yet Nostradamus writes at sufficient length of the future state of America to indicate an extraordinary knowledge. The old seer refers to this country under several names. He calls it the Hesperides, the Blessed Isles of the West. In another place, he simply names it America. And his third designation of it is the land which keeps the Thursday. This last form is the most astonishing, for it refers to the unique American holiday, Thanksgiving, which always falls upon a Thursday. And this the only holiday which depends upon the day alone for its observance, and is peculiarly the American holiday which expresses thankfulness for freedom of religion, freedom of opportunity, and freedom of life. To summarize the opinions of Nostradamus concerning the future destiny of Western civilization is difficult, because of the involved idiom of the original text, but he points out clearly certain things that will happen. He saw that a great civilization would rise in the Western world. This civilization would free itself from the bonds to its mother country, and then assume a free place among the temporal powers. The new country would flourish and extend its domain across the entire continent. It would grow rich and powerful. Oh my goodness, book style. It would grow rich and powerful. Oh my gosh. Oh. It would grow rich and powerful, he predicted, and live at peace with its sister, Canada. You sure? He said that America would have to fight several wars, including one with the Orient. This conflict he describes as an eagle flying against the rising sun, and in his day neither the eagle nor the rising sun had significance of the slightest importance in the symbolism of nations. Fulfilling its destiny, Nostradamus foretold that America would become a great power in a pattern of world peace and would be looked up to by other nations for leadership against the common evils of the time. In short, as Nostradamus foretells the story of the Blessed Isles, it is precisely according to the Platonic tradition, and we cannot but wonder if he was a party to that tradition, and knew exactly whereof he spoke. Whether the 16th century physician of France had his visions from within himself, or whether he merely wrote down... Oh my God. Whether the 16th century physician of France had his visions from within himself, or whether he merely wrote down what was given to him by another, we can never know. Conventional thinkers, doubting such prophetic powers, incline toward the second alternative, and that will leave them scarcely less comfortable of mind, for the existence of this secret brotherhood plan is then virtually admitted. Nostradamus is not the only prophet who sensed or knew the future of Western Empire. There was Dr. Ebenezer Sibley, who flourished in England about the close of the 18th century. It is reported that Sibley had a shrewish wife, and it was to escape her tongue that he retired to a garret of his house to ponder the mysteries of the universe, his meals being passed to him through a hole in the door. Dr. Sibley divided his time between an infallible elixir which, if dissolved in wine, would dissolve all human ills, and the writing of long books dealing with astrology, physiology, and anatomy. In his day, the American Republic was in its infancy, and brilliant politicians on the floor of the House of Commons were predicting that the rebellious colonies would soon be begging on bended knee to be restored to the British Commonwealth. Sibley, though a stout Britisher, expressed his regrets that he had to point out that, in one detail at least, an astrologer in his garret would prove wiser than the best politicians in Europe, for, sad to relate, the American colonies would not come home. The stars decreed otherwise. Not only would they remain outside the fold, he said, but they would grow rich and powerful, extending themselves across their continent. Americans would build great cities and develop world trade and industry. And one day, horrible thought, they would be stronger than the mother country. Oh, shit. And this was the truth that must be spoken, if only through a hole in a garret door. It should be remembered that among the ancients, astrology was one of the sciences of government. The prognostic aspect of the subject was not the main interest in the minds of such men as Pythagoras and Plato. These philosophers saw in the motion of the heavenly bodies and the order of the cosmos a great pattern of natural laws. The universe was a celestial empire populated with planets and suns and moons in a heavenly arrangement which was a clue to the proper distribution of human affairs. The state, they advocated, should be patterned after the cosmos. Governments of men should be in harmony with the larger government of the world. Many old astrological books indicate clearly that planetary symbols were used to represent the elements of a political system, and that the astrologers themselves were part of the order of the quest. Beneath the cloak of professional astrologers, they were counselors advising kings and princes to establish better laws and rule their peoples more wisely. Nostradamus was consulted by 3 kings. Europe's most powerful queen, Catherine de' Medici, also consulted him on numerous occasions. His advice was always temperate and directed toward the public good. His scholarship gave a perspective on political problems that was beyond the scope of the professions of statecraft. All the petty princes of Europe in medieval times had their Merlins, wise old men who, in many instances, were the actual rulers of the state. It is obvious that if these counselors were bound together by some common purpose, their collective power would be considerable. And they were bound together in the secret society of unknown philosophers, moving the crowns of Europe as on a mighty chessboard. Men of this caliber bring about the mutations of empire. It is the general opinion that revolutions begin with the common people, but this is not true. The benevolently informed always guide and direct public opinion. Through the centuries, the prophecies of Nostradamus have continued to exercise a powerful force on the political destiny of the world. They have been translated into most of the languages of Europe. They were frequently quoted and reprinted during the period of the First World War. And in the Second World War, both the Axis and the Allied powers have quoted Nostradamus variously to serve their purposes. It is in the larger picture of the world's future that Nostradamus indicates the coming of the Great League, or Assembly of World Powers. This league is to be the only human hope of peace, the only solution to a competition between nations. The formation of this league begins the new life of the human race, will allow the human being at last to emerge into the estate for which he was fashioned. Barbarism ends with the beginning of world civilization. To be civilized, according to Cicero, is to reach that state of personal and collective behavior in which men can live together harmoniously and constructively, united for the betterment of all. By this definition, we have never been civilized. We have existed in a state of cultured savagery. The promise of Nostradamus is especially meaningful in these difficult years, for he assures us that the Commonwealth of Nations is to become a reality.